Okay, welcome everybody to Kim's video journal, and today's date is Tuesday the 30th of June 2020. We're going to do the usual asking questions and then handing you over to Kim to talk about her autobiography, her past life and everything. So we have changed some of the questions, only 3 of them, just to adjust to her journey. And here we go. Okay, what is your name?
Kim Tolton.
How old are you?
56.
What is your date of birth?
22nd of July 1963.
Who are you talking to?
My husband Steve.
How many children have you?
4.
What are their names?
Leslie, Christopher, Carly and Michael.
Okay. What season are we in?
Summer.
What are your grandchildren's names?
Alfie, Alea, Sky and Corey and Mia.
What is your favourite colour?
Orange.
Name a fruit beginning with P.
Pomegranate.
What was your last job?
I was an advanced nurse practitioner caring for patients with bowel cancer.
What year is this at the moment?
2001.
What was the last song you danced with your granddad?
Minerva.
We're going to give you a sum. What is 100? Take away 3. That's okay. What was the name of yours and Sean's pony? What is your favourite hobby?
Horse riding.
Which town do we live in?
Bridge.
What day is Christmas Day?
25th of December.
Hold up 3 fingers.
1, 2, 3.
Name a Carpenter's song you like to sing to. Okay, you have the book next to you, Rose's Thai Calf. There is an introduction that has 9 subjects. Would you like to read them out, please?
Small bites, salads, soups, curries, stir fries, grills, marinades, rice, sweet things and basics.
Well done. Okay, is there anything in this since your last video that sticks in your mind for this last week? Anything good or bad?
Went shopping.
That's our highlight, isn't it? Every 2 weeks.
Once every 2 weeks we go for shopping for food. Can't think of anything else.
No. It's been a quiet week, no visitors. Haven't seen anyone. Such is our life now in lockdown. Okay, I'm going to pass you to Kim now because she'd like to carry on with her weekly chat about her past.
about my brothers and having to move home, and shortly after we moved home, my mum started to not feel very well, and we found out she was pregnant in her 40s, I think it was, and it came as a complete surprise. She thought she was going through the change, and she wasn't. And yeah, so when I was 15, she had James, my baby brother James, and there's 15 years or so between us. And I love him dearly, and he was a baby that was challenging for my mum in a different way, because he was hyperactive, cried and cried and cried, and always wanted to be doing the next thing before he was really able to do it, and was frustrated, and as he grew,
what their religion,
he really was challenging, because he just needed to thrill all the time, and I think it got to a point when he was a teenager, and he managed to get himself put in a prison cell overnight, and my mum and dad actually made the decision not to go and get him, and made him wait until the next day. He never did it again. But he is such a genuine guy, and he'll do anything for anyone. He's got a wonderful wife, and that was so lovely, and it was nice to sort of watch him bloom after he met Amy, and they've been together such a long time now, and children of their own. But to continue my own story, I left home at 17. Dad had got a really old, battered Mini, and he taught me to drive initially, and it didn't go well. And so I had to, in the end, I had to go and take driving lessons. And by this time in my life, I'd gone to college. I hated it. I didn't want to be there. I was in love, I thought, with my boyfriend, and I became very depressed, ended up having to take some medication because I was so stressed and unhappy. I just didn't want to be there. I wanted to be married, but my parents were not going to have any of that, and whilst I was at college, I did realise that the boyfriend I was with probably wasn't the right person, only because, you know, I think your life changes when you go to college, and you start to see that there's other opportunities out there. But I still loved him, and we were together from when I was 15, and by this time I was 18, and my dad in the end had to relate. Well, it was actually college that contacted my parents and said, Kim's really not happy, my anorexia was playing up again, and they said that they felt it wasn't appropriate for me to return to college because I wasn't happy there. My dad, I came home, he wasn't happy, and he gave me a newspaper and he said, right, you're going to sit and look in the newspapers for jobs and you're going to get a job, otherwise you're going to have to find, your own way. And I think that was the start of difficult times with my parents, because I really wanted to be stretching into my own life as opposed to doing what my parents wanted me to be doing all the time, which I think is normal as you're reaching that sort of age. And I realised when I moved, when I found a job as a jeweller, as you know, when he asked the questions each time, and I started working in the jewellers, loved it. It was a really old-fashioned shop, and had this lovely old chap who used to work doing all the repairs and everything, and he was such a lovely chap, and I fell in love with my boss, which wasn't a done thing. Wasn't really it wasn't really the right thing to be doing, but I did, and our relationship initially was blossoming really well, and I was getting more and more frustrated by the constraints of living with my parents. And I went home one night and said, I just want to let you know, at some point in the future, I'm going to move in with him. And my mum went mad. I'd never seen her like it, never. And I had to be out of the house. I had to go. And it was really difficult, and I had a whole year of being estranged from my parents, and my brothers were not permitted to contact me, although my brother Sean did. He came and visited me. My maternal grandparents wouldn't have contact with me. I was supporting my mum, and my paternal grandmother, my dad's mum, she did stand by me, and we used to write to one another, and she was really supportive, and she kept telling me everything would sort itself out. And unfortunately it was her death, her sudden death that brought the family back together again. So that was very difficult, but it was nice to be reunited with my family. And I think that was the first time I really, in my life, experienced something so difficult like that. But we moved on, which was great, and once it was dealt with and we talked out our feelings, it was just like going back to normal. And it wasn't a great deal of time. I was working in the jewellers, and because it was not the done thing, we had a big shop refit and the big bosses came down as part of this big refit of the jewellers, and they twigged that my husband, who was to be my husband, was clearly involved with me, and I realised I had to say goodbye to my boyfriend from school, and we realised that we needed for me to find a job elsewhere. And so I started working for Customs and Excise in Southend, helped largely by my dad, who was already a civil servant. And it was interesting because for a shy girl, it was intimidating. Back then, I was on a telephone bank initially, and I'd said to them at the time, I really don't like telephones, talking on the telephone to people, but that's the job that they gave me. And I hated it, absolutely hated it. On the times that I could swap and be doing admin stuff, I liked that, but I didn't like being on the telephone bank. And back in those days with Customs and Excise, people would be on the phone waiting to be picked up for hours, and I really do mean hours and hours and hours. So by the time you took the call, 90% of people were so abusive, and I was not familiar with that. I had no skills in any shape or form. It used to just really make me very, very anxious. But I made a lot of friends, and it was nice actually to be working in a large building with lots of different people of different ages and different lives, different people, and it helped me to get more social. I think the only time I became traumatised completely was I arrived at work one day, and we were right in the top of the building. It was Southend-on-Seas branch, and I was coming in and I put my coat down, and a chap who was working in the same team as me opened the window, and he got up and stood on the table, and I thought, oh, that's a bit odd, perhaps he's seen something he wants to wipe the window down or something, but he just stepped out. He just stepped out and landed on the floor. And floors and floors and floors above. He didn't even know or anything. He just stepped out. And I've never seen anything or heard of anything like that. I just hadn't been on my radar that was something people did. And that was really traumatic. And you kind of, it runs through your mind, could I have foreseen that? Could I have made a difference? Could I have stopped him in some way? And the whole office was really shocked, obviously. And it was a catalyst, really, because it had traumatised me, and going back into that office every day was really difficult for a while. And then I decided to put myself up for promotion chances, and I had an interview, and I moved to King's Bean House in London, and that was amazing because it was so multicultural. Now, I'd had a friend at school who was Indian when I was at secondary school, and she was my best friend. We were like two oddballs together, but it was great. And we kept our friendship going even after leaving school for a while. And her family would have me for tea once a week, and she taught me how to make Indian food, just everyday simple Indian cooking. And they had all their own herbs grown in the garden that she just used to go and pick. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was the first time I'd tasted chilli. And it was fabulous. But so moving to King's Bean House was fantastic because it was so multicultural, so many different people, and I loved listening to people's life stories in there. There was a real camaraderie. The job I did was incredibly boring. Working in the print department, but the actual work lifestyle was fantastic. I could work flexi hours, so long as I did the hours I had to do in a day. You know, I could work around that, which was amazing. And I made some really good friends. I was with my boyfriend still at that point, and during that time the shop closed down, so we had no home because we, as part of the shop agreement, it came with a flat that you we rented, and obviously when the shop shut, we had no home. So for a period of time, we were living with my parents, and with Dad's help and his contacts, we were lucky. It was Thatcher years, and she was opening up opportunities for people with new builds, and we were able to purchase our first home. And but we then, and around the same time, I got married for the first time. And we had to live with my parents for a while, as I say. We then moved into our first starter home, which was a bungalow. It was literally, well, it was so tiny. It was, it had a balcony bedroom with stairs going up. It had a shower, and it had a tiny galley kitchen, really tiny galley kitchen, and that was it. And we had to try and cram our big furniture into this tiny little home. But during that time, I think even before I got married, I was 18 when I got married for the first time. The night before we were getting married was the first time I saw his rage. And I can remember walking the streets thinking, what do I do? What do I do? And because of what had happened, when I'd said to my parents that I wanted to get married, I really thought, I can't bring this on my parents. I can't go back home. I can't pitch up and say I failed. So I went ahead with the wedding because I felt I didn't have really much else I could do. I'm sure my parents would have just picked me up and gone, don't worry, it doesn't matter, forget it, come home. So anyway, I went ahead with the wedding, and then we bought our house, first home. And I fell in love with somebody at work, a chap at work who came from Singapore. Nothing happened. There was no sex. But he wanted me to leave him and move in with him. And I knew for sure that that was the wrong thing to do, because in my book, you get married for life. And so I just had, he was going away to Singapore for a long holiday, and he'd wanted a decision from me before he left, and I said, I can't make a decision yet. And I was so unhappy because by this time I'd been smashed into a glass coffee table twice by my husband, and certainly pushed around a lot by my husband, and a lot of rage. and I was really unhappy in my marriage. And it was very tempting, but my moral compass said, you can't do that. And so I said goodbye to somebody that I wished I hadn't said goodbye. In the scheme of things, I'm pleased the way life works out for me. But I was very unhappy in my marriage. We subsequently then found out I was pregnant, and this is while the chap that I'd fallen in love with was away. And by the time he came back, I had a very obvious baby bump. The office knew, and it was amazing that the amount of people that were saying, oh, he looks so much like the chap that I was in love with. And I saw the pain on his face when he did come back to work. And he couldn't talk to me, and he actually got moved to a different department altogether, which was dreadful. It was dreadful, it really was. But and I can remember there was one night, I didn't know it at the time, but I know now, I took in my sleep. And there was one night that my husband said, oh, who's so-and-so? So I'd obviously been talking in my sleep about him. And it was really painful to sever that relationship, even though nothing intimate had happened. But I felt very guilty anyway, but in any case. From there, we obviously struggled living in this tiny little bungalow, as it was called. And as my pregnancy was very problematic, I was hospitalised for a good portion of it. And I had to go off sick for quite a long period of time, then went back to work. And you know, bear in mind, we were just a very young couple starting out in life, and it really was a difficult time. My husband had lost his job because he'd lost his temper at work. So in the end, somebody I knew managed to find a job for him, doing all the street lights, which was very lowly paid. We were, you know, still trying to find the money to pay our mortgage. And then my first son was born premature. It was a very traumatic delivery. And because we had the mortgage, I had to go back to work. My son, well, we nearly lost my son several times when he was a baby. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. He was in special care baby unit for ages, and that's the only time I ever saw my husband cry. Was when we thought we were losing him. Several times we thought we were losing him. But he pulled through. He did go on to have Asperger's, but he's a wonderful boy. Anyway, so that's my Leslie. And he, I think I spoke a little bit about him before, but I knew when my father-in-law died that he would be called Leslie, and so he was. That was my wish. And we then had to move home because we needed, Leslie was getting bigger, and the place we were living in, it was basically just a one-bedroom house. Well, one bedroom, half a house. So we were lucky that the climate was such with the Thatcher years that we could get a much better mortgage, and even for the few years that we'd lived in the bungalow, we actually got a fantastic return on our mortgage exchanging, and bought our first house. And that's probably a good place to leave it today. But I loved becoming a mum. It was finding my purpose in life. However, as I say, I did initially have to go back to work because we had to pay bills. But unfortunately, Leslie was very poorly and remained poorly until he was a couple of years old, really. Lots and lots of problems with him, lots and lots of blue lights to hospital, and he was my priority, and so I had to give up work. But in giving up working for customs and excise, my dad started giving me work because I'd done art at school, and then when I was at college I studied art, and my dad worked in reprographics, and I'd subsequently worked for HMRC in doing all the proof work of all the documents. So he gave me work to do, and then I used to, once he had a unit, I used to go into the unit with Leslie in a baby in this pram, and I'd be tapping away, doing all the typing, and they running stuff through the phototype setter, and it was great, and it gave me extra income. Dad gave me an old Chrysler Alpine to get about in, because I used to have to do deliveries, and yeah, it was an interesting time. So that's kind of up to becoming a mum, and having our first child. I think I'll leave it there this week, and I'll carry on next week.
Okay, it's quite a long one, that 40 minutes.
Sorry.
That's
You
okay.
say you should tell
No,
me?
it's fine. Still going, so it's okay. Thank you everyone for listening, and yep, we'll catch up with you all again next week. And thank you for watching and listening.